Hey there, it's Jason from Unity3D.College. Today I'm going to show you how to build a nice expandable and collapsible window in Unity using the UGUI system. So you'll have a window like this where you can add new components, have it automatically resize to fit everything, rearrange as you drag things in the hierarchy, and then just collapse back down. It'll work across multiple resolutions as well, so you can use this on mobile games or Windows games or just regular old apps that need to run at different screen sizes. Alright, let's get started. To make all this work, we're going to use the content size fitters and horizontal layout groups. If you've tried using these components before, they can be a little bit frustrating, just kind of figuring out the basics. So we'll go over some of the issues that I've run into before and some of the things that I tend to forget. And by the end of this, you should be able to build a nice responsive UI for your own app or game. Alright, to get started, we just have an empty scene here, and I'm going to create a new canvas. So just go into UI and canvas, and we're just going to leave everything in the default values for this. We don't really need to change anything. You do want to make sure that you have a canvas scaler on your canvas though. It should be there by default, but if it's not, you'll notice some issues when you start resizing. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add an empty child, and we're just going to name this collapsible window. This window is just going to stay centered as it is. We don't need to change anything on the transform, but we do need to add a content size fitter. And on the content size fitter, we want to set both of the values to preferred size. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is add another child. We'll just do create empty, and we'll name this window contents. This is going to contain everything that's in our window. We also want to anchor this to the top left. And let me slide over here so you can kind of see it. And then we'll set the width to 500 or so. Oh, let's go to 350 for this one. Kind of zoom out a little bit. There we go. I'm going to move this collapsible window up a little too. Can't really see it yet. Okay, now that we have the contents, we're going to create, well, actually, we're going to add a layout group. So vertical layout group. And we want to check the child controls size and height and leave force child expand on them. We also want to add another component that's another content size fitter. This one we're only going to set to preferred size for the vertical fit. We don't want it stretching the width. This is just going to go up and down. After we have this, we'll add a header. So to do that, we'll go to UI and panel. And that's just going to add an image with the background source image already set. So for this panel, since it's going to be our header, I'm going to rename it header. And then I want to add a layout element. So we'll go layout element. And we're going to set a minimum height here of, I think I'm going to go with 80. And we'll just make that the preferred height as well. Oh, it was already set. One thing we also want to check is this flexible height. We don't want this panel expanding, so setting it to 0 will prevent this specific panel from expanding. We only really want the body that's in the middle of our window contents to expand. I'm also going to darken this image a little bit and go with like a darker gray and I'll probably remove almost all the alpha. I'll remove it all. Now I want to add a little text element, so just go to UI and text. And we've got to change the color because it's black on gray. That won't work. And then we'll check the best fit. So just auto size, center it there, and then we're going to anchor it to the right. Alt and Shift. While you click on this, we'll move it right over. And I think we're good there. I want to put a little bit of an offset here. So I'm going to put -20. The reason for that is just if we had a lot of text here. So it's like a very long name for collapsible. For window. So if we didn't have that -20, you can see it slide all the way over to the edge. I just want to have a little bit of a margin there. Actually, let's make it -10. Next, we're going to add a button. So go to UI and button. The button we're going to anchor to the left. So just click to the left, and we'll set a margin of 10 there too. And then we're going to expand out and just delete the text object. We don't need that. I also want to resize this so that it's about 45 by 30. And I'm going to change out the image to an arrow that I have from Asset Pack. You can use your own image or create one, or just leave it as the default if you want. Or even just have a little text object with a plus in there and a minus. That's in position, and we want to rename it Expand Button. This is going to expand out our window. But we also need a collapse button. So when this window is expanded, we want to switch over to a collapse one. So I'll duplicate this with Control D and then rename this Collapse Button. And I'm going to add some events now. So the expand button is selected. And over here in the on click section, I can hit plus to add a new event. So it's just something that'll happen when the button is clicked. I'm going to add 2 events. The first one, I'm going to drag over the expand object. Make this a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to select game object, set active, and leave it unchecked. So when we click on this button, it's going to set this button to unchecked or inactive, essentially doing that and turning it off. The other thing I want to do is add the collapse button down here. And we'll do game object, set active to true. Now I'm going to go over to the collapse button, and I'm going to do the same thing, but in reverse values. So the collapse button will set itself to inactive. So collapse button set off active with it unchecked. And it's going to set the expand button to active. So we go to game object, set active, and check it. Now, one more thing I want to do before we do a quick test is select the expand button and just disable it. Oh, and I want to go on to the collapse button, and you see how we've got the image and it still is pointing down. I want this to point up. To do that, I'm just going to change the scale here to -1. Just going to flip it right over. So now I hit play. And you see I can click the button and it toggles between the two. If I unselect that, if you look in the hierarchy, you'll see it's switching between which one is active. Alright, the next step here is to add a body. So we've got the header, it's kind of ready. Oh, let me change this text. Expandable window. And I think I want to make it a little bit wider before we go on. Okay, cool. Now, next step, we're going to add a body. So I'm going to go add, create empty right here, name it body. The body is going to need a couple of components. It's going to need a content size fitter, and it's going to need the vertical fit set to preferred size. And there's a warning here. You don't need to worry about this. It's just telling us that we have a content size fitter inside of a horizontal layout group, and you might not be trying to do that it's going to be overriding your layout group stuff. But for this case, we actually want that to happen. We want our body to expand based off of how much content we put in there. We also need a vertical layout group in here. And we're going to check all of the boxes. So child control size and height for height and width. And then we want to put some margins here. So I'm just going to put a value of 5 across left, right, top, and bottom. And I'll even put a value of 5 in for spacing, so we get a little bit of space between our objects. Now I want to go on to the body and just add a couple UI components. So I'll add a button here, and maybe let's add a slider and a text object. Cool. And now with all of these selected, I just select them all. I want to add layout elements. So layout element, and I'm going to set a minimum height to 50, and a the width. Minimum height and width to, let's go with 50. And then you can see the slider looks a little weird at 50, so I'm just going to individually select it and maybe scale it down to 30. And you can tell, because it's in that layout group, this horizontal layout group, it's just auto resizing the child to match what the layout element is requesting. And why don't we add just another button down here at the bottom? So we got a button, a slider, some text, and another button. And I'm going to add even more. Let's go into UI, and we'll add a toggle. There we go. So now we got a little checkbox and all kinds of exciting things. Oh, but this toggle doesn't have a layout element, so let's add that there. layout element, preferred height of, I don't know, what's a toggle height, 20. Preferred minimum of 20. We don't really want it growing past the minimum height. That's great. The next thing we need is to select this body and add an image. So we don't have a background image yet. The window just kind of looks like a header with some floating stuff. So I'm going to go to add an image. And then you can see we've got an image here that filled it up. There's no sprite assigned though. If I just select the default background image like this, it'll fill in just fine. It looks okay. If we've got a background, we can color it, change it however we want. So if I want to change this image, I can go in and select a new image. And I've got an asset pack that I'm using from the store here. You can use your own or just use the default. But if I select a different image, like I select this darks, I'll go with the blue-green. It's a nice looking background. You see it expanded all the way out, and it's totally broken everything. If we change the image type over though from simple to sliced, we're back in business. So what's happening is it's just trying to scale it to the actual image resolution there. So it's trying to get to 1200 pixels tall. It's just way too long, and then it seems to bug out and get even worse. The next thing I'm going to do is just add a little footer. To do that, I'll just go to UI and make one more panel. I'll name it footer. And here you can see it automatically got added to the bottom. I'll just go in and add a layout element. And let's set a minimum height of 50 for this thing. Oh no, let's go to 30. I want this to be a relatively small footer. And we'll set a preferred height of 30. And we don't want this one to have flexible height again, so set that to 0. Just like the header, we want the footer to stay the same size. And I think I'll add a little bit of text here, so right align it and just call it footer text. Great text stuff, and let's anchor it to the right too. Remember, it's Alt and Shift to move it over when you click that button. Then we'll give it a margin of 10 pixels. Cool, so we're almost done. If I hit play now, you see that the window's there and it's laid out okay, but it doesn't collapse. And if I go in and expand and maybe duplicate another button, you see it's automatically sizing and it looks right. But I want to make this whole thing collapse. So to do that, I'm going to go back over to the buttons, select the expand button, and just add 2 more events. And we'll just drop in the body and the footer. And we'll do the same exact thing we did before. So just go to game object set active, game object set active. And this is the expand button, so we want to turn both of those on. For the collapse button, we'll do the same, but we're going to leave set active set to false. So drop in the body, drop in the footer, and go to set active on both of these, and it's already defaulting to false. I think it pulls from the previous value right there. Now if I save my scene, press play, you see that I can now expand and collapse my window. And like I said before, we can add new things to this at runtime. We can resize it. We can have lots of text. This thing can get big, like a full paragraph of stuff down here. Can't really see it because it's on that black background spot. There we go. All right, so before we go, the last thing I wanted to show you was that if we build this UI with this layout element stuff and the content size fitters, it's actually really responsive and it'll work across a bunch of different resolutions and target devices. You won't have to change it for individual resolutions. So here I've got it anchored to the top left, and you can see if I go to the game view, right now it's in free aspect mode and it works fine, stuck up on the top left. If I change this over to like 1280 by 1920, it's still in the same spot, same size, hasn't changed at all. I can switch over to a really high resolution, or I can go down to 1024 by 768. Yeah, it's still here and it still works. So we're good to go. We don't have to make any modifications or customize UIs for different resolutions. All right, so that's just some of the basics with the UGUI system. There's a lot more you can do, but I think the content size fitter and the layout groups with layout elements are kind of the most important thing to get a good grasp on first. Once you have those, it's pretty easy to start building really responsive UIs. The project source for this too is going to be available in the description below. You can just download it as an asset pack and try it out. So let me know what you think, try it out, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. All right, thanks a lot.